Call the meeting to order. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Fletcher, will you help us and start with us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Call the meeting to order. Everyone is present and in their chairs except for Dave. Everybody has seen the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve the agenda.
All in favor? Aye. Anybody here with public comments? Did you raise your hand, Mr. Cameraman? Okay, approval of the minutes, January 13th, 2015, regular board meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Yep, let's move this along here. Communications. We have a number of donations. The Counteract program seeks donations every year, and we get the same 3 donors. Very much appreciated. Waupaca Foundry, First National Bank, Farmers State Bank, each contribute $600 towards that program. We thank them for that. We also have a donation, combination Century Insurance and Stephen Johnson. I believe it's a matching fund, $400 to Waupaca men's hockey.
Anything in particular that you use that for?
No.
Mr. Johnson?
Do you know if it was donated
I
for
don't
a
know.
purpose? Do you know what they're using that money for? Is there anything in particular?
They haven't used it yet.
Okay.
It's put into their activity account.
New puck?
Probably.
That's a lot of new pucks.
So we'll need a motion to accept the donation.
Is there a motion out there?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you notes from the family of James Rubin. That would be the father of middle school local music teacher Laurel Leader, who passed away. The board sent a donation to the high school scholarship foundation in his name. Recognition this February 9th through 13th is the school bus driver.
Recognition week.
Yeah, School Bus Driver Recognition Week. So it's our time to recognize the work that our bus drivers do. We have some excellent bus drivers driving in all kinds of weather and all kinds of conditions throughout the year. So we thank you and your bus drivers for the work you do.
School board, through any reports on the state school board convention?
Yes, I have a report on that. I took some notes. I went to some different strands, as you know, those of you who've been at the conference. And I was surprised at myself at how many notes I actually took. It was a good thing to do in hindsight because it helped me to remember a little bit.
You don't have to use them all.
I know.
We need to get home by 10 o'clock.
I'll try to be brief. I went to several of the keynote speaker assemblies, obviously, and I went to the delegate assembly voting on, and I think Dave has already sent all of you, a list of the different proposals, and so I don't need to talk about those. I'll just make mention of a couple of them in terms of the ones that got the most discussion, let's put it that way. And quite honestly, it was a pretty civil discussion on almost all of them. People, as you know, can, from different school boards and or superintendents, financial officers, because it's a combined convention, can speak freely on those subjects. And the one that probably got the most time and interesting, I thought, was one I mentioned to you last time a little bit and that was on the retirement service, retirement separation date or time period. the proposal from the Wisconsin School Board Association was to try and change that separation time that the state has presently of 75 days back to 60 days, so that districts would have more time to hire back people if necessary. That was the intent. Well, there was a lengthy discussion on changing that 60 days to 30 days. So we first had to vote on whether we wanted to change it to 30, we being the delegates. Now there's 350 people, obviously, and my one vote isn't gonna make too much difference here. But that passed, meaning to change it to 30, and then the entire resolution with that change in it passed, and I just wrote the number down just so that you could see, it passed 302 to 16 in favor of changing it back to 30 days. Most of the people who spoke, again, not everybody was in favor, but most of the people who spoke came from smaller districts and rural areas who said, look, we just don't have the opportunity to find people right away in every situation. We need the flexibility here to say, okay, if we need to bring somebody back for a short term, we gotta be able to do that. That's what we heard over and over and over again. So I just thought that was interesting because it received so much of the play there. The second one that was really pretty interesting, and because it affects board members in particular, was the resolution on whether board members should be allowed to serve as volunteer coaches or student advisors. And there was a pretty healthy discussion on that as well. Again, a lot of districts who are in small communities have said, look, we have board members, and I suspect there are people here today who could attest to this, who have spent many, many hours and days working with young people, either in, in academic kinds of settings, in sports settings, or whatever. And so that it's a necessary sort of thing to be able to do, especially in small areas. And so that was voted to, in 269 to 44 was the final vote on that, even though some people were opposed because it looks as though ethically that's not such a good thing to do, even when it's volunteer, because of code of conduct. So that received quite a bit of discussion. I was surprised. I thought that from the perspective of most of us, it would seem like sort of a no-brainer that if you wanted to do some volunteer work, that'd be a good thing. But there were a number of people who spoke against that because of the ethics involved.
So Pat, do you know,
yeah.
is there legislation that doesn't allow that right now? Or what is the resolution to do to promote legislation, or?
Well, it's kind of nebulous. If you look at the situation, it talks about the ethics of a board member, and I think that that's where it comes in, that people who put themselves out there in volunteer situations, ethically, it looks as though they're attaining some kind of favoritism by the public, perhaps, and somebody who, and I don't know who put this resolution forward, quite honestly, but there must have been an incident or a series of incidents that made it come forward. And there were 44 school district delegates who voted against it, so there obviously were some people who thought that school board members should not be able to do that, even when it is a volunteer situation. So that had quite a healthy discussion on it. And again, I was a little surprised because I didn't expect that to be very
Question.
controversial.
How many delegates per school?
One.
One, okay.
So in most of these voting, as I say, there were about 325 to 330 voting delegates. Now, not everybody voted on every issue, but the maximum was, I think, was 325.
There are about 420 some school districts in the state of Wisconsin.
That could
so
have.
that's about three-quarters,
About
75% represented.
Right. So anyway, that's really all. I think the rest of them were all pretty pro forma, and there wasn't a whole lot of discussion. In most cases, there were a couple of people who presented them, and maybe one or two comments, and then people voted, and most everything went through pretty much as you would expect. So the only one that had, again, a little bit of discussion, I'll mention it because the governor spoke then afterwards, and that, of course, is the one that we've all been hearing about in the public eye lately, and that is whether or not school boards should hire a person without proper licensure through the education departments of universities. And that got quite a bit of play at the delegate assembly as well. And they had put forth the proposal to, in fact, allow for that, school boards to allow for that, and that did pass. And the number on that, I know I wrote it down, but I don't see it right in front of me. It was fairly close. It was like 184 and 110 against, or something like that. A little bit more of an even split. That was the only one that was close to an even split. Everything else was pretty one-sided. And I'll just speak to that in a minute here, because the governor did speak on it. Okay, I went to a conference, one of the small Strand conferences was on health and wellness. I spoke to Dave about this a little earlier, and that was very interesting. That's where I mentioned the other day, M3 comes up. They sponsored it along with Humana. And it was very interesting because they pointed out a couple of things, and I thought I'd just throw these statistics out. We're all very much concerned about test scores. I think we have to be as districts, as teachers, as administrators. They pointed out that for every 10 days that a teacher misses school, test scores go down 3.3 points on a national average. So what the suggestion is that they were saying to districts, if you're really concerned about your testing, then you really should be concerned about having healthy staff, because missing staff means lower test scores. Okay, so they kept trying to tie that in with the idea that having a healthy staff is not only good for all the staff members, but it's also good for your overall projection as a district. And then they had a lot of different possibilities of trying to keep people more healthy. And of course, we have a healthy committee here. We're doing lots of those things anyway, but it was interesting. The other aspect to that, though, that I would encourage us to look at is in Southern Door. I mentioned this to Dave earlier. Southern Door was the superintendent from there, a woman, and I don't recall her name. She said that they've had a very successful program opening up their facilities for exercise and walking. She said that they have 70 people now who have signed up. They've each paid $100, so that's $7,000. To come in to use their exercise equipment that they have in their gym. They have make application, they have background, not checks, but they're all kind of vetted. They get a pass, they can come in and use them when their hours are available to them, not during the school day, but in the morning, in the evening. She said it's been a wonderful program for them, for people who want to do that. And then they have a lot of walkers who come in the morning early and after hours, meaning like from 4 o'clock till 9 in the evening, and from 6:30 to 7:30 in the morning. She said the byproduct of all that has been something they had never thought of is they have had no incidences in their school in the last 2 years in terms of vandalism, because when their walkers and people are in, they're all wonderful security people. She said it's made a big difference. They've seen things, they've said things to people and stopped anything that may have happened. So something to think about, I think, because obviously people are always looking for that. The next strand I went to was on strategic planning for districts, kind of long-term planning. And again, I mentioned to Dave, and we have mission statements. There was a lot of talk about what strategic plan each district should have and how to set that up. Most districts don't have a visible plan. By that I mean the one that you're looking at day in and day out. And they suggested that if you did have something very visible or very commonly used and referred to, it's great for school board members, because then when you're talking to parents or teachers or community members and they want to know about certain issues, you kind of have a focus on where you're going as a district, and that's why we're doing what we're doing, or we're not doing what we're doing. And they used an example, and I'll just give you a couple here, plugging in our district. They plugged in kind of a fictitious school district. But they said, for instance, in Waupaca, we use ourselves as an example, where are we in terms of laptop computers for every student in the next 3 to 5 years? Are we moving in that direction? Are we staying status quo, or are we not moving in that direction? If we knew the answers to that, we're pretty, then when parents ask, or a school, or a community member asks, that you'd have some kind of a response to that. So their suggestion was, if you haven't thought about some of these strategically for long-term, you should. Okay, and I'm just throwing these out because these are the same examples that they asked us here. What is Waupaca doing in terms of industrial arts and FACE departments? What are we doing in terms of long-range student population trends in terms of staffing? Because every district. Of course, the trends may be up or down, mostly down. What are we doing in terms of long-range financial? Well, last night we had a great report on that. I think that sort of takes care of itself. What about our long-range ability to attract and keep excellent teachers now and in the next 3 to 5 years? And what is the best measure to base our accountability? And I talked to Dave a little bit about this, as we all know we have tests out there, and we have a multitude of tests out there. And people at this strand, it was encouraging to know that I wasn't the only person, and I can't speak for all of you, but I know for myself, it gets a little confusing in terms of all the testing we're doing, as to which one is really the one we should monitor more than anything else. And somebody asked exactly that question, and the presenters were both long-term educators, superintendents, and academic people for a long time. They had 30 and 40 years of experience. And the answer to that by one of the gentlemen, which I thought was pretty concise and pretty good, was you need to pick one test that your district is doing out of all the things you're doing and try to keep track of that in a simplified way and then use that as your barometer. If you try to do all of them, and there are a ton of them out there, as we know, and we hear about it all the time, he said, it just confuses the issue, and quite frankly, then you don't know where you are. And when I was talking to Dave, he suggests probably a map test would be our easiest and best way to look at things. Then if somebody says to you from the community, geez, how are you guys doing, and this, that, or the other thing, say, well, according to our map test, we're increased, or we're staying the same, or we've dropped a little, I don't know. But at least you have one barometer.
Just to clarify, that's what I suggested we're using in our educator effectiveness, SLOs and PPGs as the map test progress, so we can measure progress beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. Layered over that then comes our Badger exam or any of the others that we're taking. But student improvement, teacher evaluations are reflected in the results of the map test generally.
And as you all know from listening, we may not be at the end of the line with testing. There may be some more coming down the pipe. And they suggested that. So that's why if you choose one, kind of have it as your barometer to start with, you're better off. I thought that was a pretty good just piece of information. The next strand I went to, and again, as a board member, nothing personal, was on superintendent and administrator evaluations. You know, these are school board association meetings, and they have all of that sort of thing. So I went to that. And it was interesting, quite frankly, because there's a lot of things about the whole process of administrative evaluation and superintendent evaluation that I don't know about and didn't know about. I didn't realize how much is covered by legal statutory things already, and I'm sure Dave knows a lot more about all of that than I do. But they went over some of that. They talked about the need for transparency in terms of evaluations. Things should be distributed to the public when asked for, and so forth, not to keep things behind closed doors. Once certain things are accomplished, then to bring it forward. Talked about using specific forms that are consistent for all administrative staff, and then have a yearly kind of look at them to see if their last year is an improvement, just like we do with evaluating students and teachers and so forth. The administrators should have the same. We should do surveys of strategic stakeholders about our administrative staff. And we should have a board policy to cover the administrative evaluations. I don't know, do we have that, Dave? Do we have a
policy on evaluation?
Okay. And again, I'm writing these down because I don't know the answer. I'm obviously new to the board relatively, so as I'm writing them down, I don't know the answers, and if we have them, great, but I didn't know about them.
I would like to clarify, I looked at that sectional in the catalog, because we had that discussion about, is it principals or is it administrators? That was purely a superintendent evaluation sectional you went to.
Yeah, it was, and that was the title, but the person in there talked about how this is pretty similar to superintendents and administrators are
Well,
similar.
except administrative principals are under the educator effectiveness. It's a whole separate evaluation that they are being evaluated on annually. So that one is prescribed by statute.
Okay.
And that's what they're under. There's no prescribed evaluation as such for superintendents, but I think that sectional was focused on superintendents, not on theirs.
Okay. Well, they gave this, like, there's a sample they gave of all the questions that district administrator job description and all the different performance situations and whatnot. Again, school ABC, just a boilerplate, just to give you kind of the idea of what we're talking about here. Anyway, again, I'm learning as I'm going, so. I went to the keynote speaker on Thursday, a gentleman from England whose name escapes me. I didn't write it down, I got it in the booklet, but I won't look it up right now. He's from England, and he was very, very good, very interesting, very motivational in a lot of respects. And just a couple of things from him. He basically said that, of course, as we all know, he being from England and the UK, you know, education is global. And much of what we are doing now, we look at other systems. He also made and he was very humorous at times, he made a couple of statements about Finland, because for a while Finland was sort of the mecca. He said a few years ago there were probably more educators in Finland than there were students, you know, looking at their system. But he said, quite frankly, that's sort of become passe, Finland has, because we realize that when you look at a system like Finland has, it's not really comparing apples to apples. Their system is different for a lot of different reasons because of their homogeneous grouping of people. They're smaller in size than a lot of other countries. There's socialistic concepts built in that a lot of countries don't have, all that sort of thing. So he in his own words, you know, he said that, you know, you have to take all of that with a grain of salt and just kind of look at it. He talked about the idea of testing. In England, he says, I'm sure you test as much as we're testing over there. In his words, he said, it's a lot of rubbish. It provides too much stress with questionable results. And that were his comments. But he did make a couple of interesting comments. He said China, in just this last fall, 2014, just came out, he said, if you haven't heard, you know, it's been making some news, just announced that it is suspending all state testing. And he said the reason for that, from what he can gather, because he's been in contact with some of those people, it's providing limited results that are positive and very negative in terms of stressful situations for students. I think many of us know that the whole Asian concept is pretty competitive, and it's gotten to the point where it's a little bit out of hand, and China has suspended all of it. Interesting. I mean, I don't know what to make of that other than just telling you. And he made one other comment I thought that was interesting. He had a chance to speak in the Middle East. I think it was Saudi Arabia. And when he was speaking there, he happened to be another speaker, Steve Wozniak from Apple Computers, and Steve Jobs, who started Apple Computers. And as it turned out, the two of them rode home together on the plane. And he said it was very interesting, the conversation they had. But the one comment he had a chance to ask Steve Wozniak was, you know, when you started out with Apple Computers, what kind of people did you look for, educational-wise and so forth? And his comment, he thought, was pretty incisive, insightful. He said, we started at the very beginning with one simple idea, and that is to hire people who don't need to be managed. And he said, I think until the day I retired, we still kept that mantra. Hire people that don't need to be managed, which sort of flies in the face sometimes of how we treat our system and students. We want to kind of keep them boxed in. He said, you got to be careful we don't micromanage too much. It was interesting. It was an interesting comment, and I don't know where it goes. I went to another one on referendum strategy. I won't even mention because we aren't going to do any referendums here recently. It was interesting. But I just kind of wind up. The governor came to speak. I think you all know that. First of all, I'll tell you just from a personal point of view, he was very warmly received. Okay, the audience was very polite. He received a standing ovation, as all of our speakers received. So I guess I would say no less, no more than just any of our speakers, which was good. Which was very good. There were no incidences, nothing to be concerned about, because there could have been, I'm sure. A couple of his comments that he made that if you haven't already heard, I mean, most of this is pretty much already in the news. A couple little things, maybe not. He's big about school report cards, the A to F idea. He wants to consolidate all of the data that Dave was just talking about, all the different kinds of things that are being layered over school districts, and get them into A, B, C, D, or F. Okay, he thinks that'll be a good thing, and then parents, communities can evaluate kind of quickly. I don't know, it sounds a little simplistic, but that's what he's suggesting here. Now,
Pat, if I can,
Yeah.
just to clarify that, currently schools are evaluated on a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. He
Okay.
wants to change that from 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to A, B, C, D, and F, because he thinks a C is more reflective than a 3. People are fighting that, saying if you're a 3 school, you're meeting expectations. But if you're a C school, people look less kindly on a C school than they would a 3 school. And that's why we're fighting that letter designation versus the current 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
okay. Yeah, he didn't say that, but I mean, he did say that it simplifies and lets us know better, blah, blah, blah.
But the real issue is going from numbers to letters.
Okay.
That's, because we're currently numbered.
Okay. He did say, however, that he's not in favor of having any kind of attachment to those letters, even if they're poor letter grades. And I think you know that. In other words, he said that the whole idea of closing a school down because they have a poor grade is bad business. And he said, quite frankly, that it would be bad for any community. Well, I thought to myself, you know, if you're in a small community and your school is asked to close down, I would say that's sort of a bad situation for everybody. And pretty soon your town is gonna, you know, dry up and blow away. You can't exist without it. So the people who talk about that, I think, maybe don't realize the ramifications or are using some veiled threat. As he said, he's not in favor of that. He doesn't think that'll come to pass, but that was just his comments. He admitted to the need for more teachers in tech ed fields, which is part of what his agenda is, as you know. As he says, we have a need in that area. Therefore, he's in favor of teachers with experience and a bachelor's degree being able to, quote unquote, skip educational classes at a university if they can demonstrate proficiency and pass a test. They can be licensed, and then you as a board, meaning us as a board, would have the opportunity to either hire that person or not hire that person. It'd be our choice. He did, and I mentioned this to Dave, he mentioned Mr. Tony Evers, who's the DPI superintendent, as you know, many times in his talk as though they were really on board together with this. Because he said, well, Mr. Evers and I will work out, because somebody asked a question about what kind of a test would you give somebody. Well, we'll work that out at the DPI, and of course, I don't know that Tony has any idea what they're going to do with that. But anyway, it was interesting only because that's something that's gotten a lot of play recently in the press. He is very much proposing more curriculum on career paths and choices, and he talked about the European model, more meaning students who maybe in 8th grade start looking at moving in certain directions prior to coming into high school. I'm not quite sure what that means, but he talked a lot about more apprenticeships. And he mentioned, of course, higher education is costly, so he's keeping the tuition at universities frozen. I think that's been a big play in the press recently. He didn't say anything about cutting anything. That came out with his budget, but he did say that he was freezing tuition. And lastly, he mentioned anecdotally, I thought it was kind of interesting. He has 2 sons, both are in college now. One's at Madison and one's at Marquette. And he said neither of them followed his advice of going to a 2-year tech school. But he thought, he mentioned that choices are there. And he did say this, and I thought this was a little bit simplistic, and I don't mean to downplay it because it's got some merit. And quite frankly, I enjoyed listening to him because I think it's important to know what it is that he's trying to come across with. But he said that he recently went last spring, his son graduated, his youngest son, and he went to the graduation ceremony, and I think it's Menominee Falls. I may be wrong on that. Is it? Yeah. Yeah, Waupaca. And he went to the high school graduation, and like many parents, he came in and they were given a program. And the program lists all the students, and then it tells where they go to school most of the time. There's so-and-so going into, UW Stevens Point, and this person's going to Mass, blah, blah, blah. And then they had a breakdown of the students going on to school. 68% of our school students are going to a 4-year college, blah, blah, blah. He suggested that one of the biggest things that school districts could do to help with the idea of giving students more of a feeling that tech schools and 2-year schools are important is to have the percentage of graduating seniors be highlighted, not only for four-year schools, but for two-year and tech schools. Now, I think we do that, I think.
At graduation and recognition night, we post in the program where the students are anticipating to go. We list the technical schools, the colleges.
Right, but as a graduating class percentage, like 72 are going to four-year and 28 are going to this, do we do that?
We don't break that down by
Okay,
percentage.
and that's what he was referring to, and they did, at Waupaca, they evidently didn't do that either, and he said, I was surprised that we didn't see how many percentage-wise are going. He said if school districts would do that, that might give more of an incentive. That was what his thoughts were on that, and that's what he kind of left us with at the very end, not just to push the four-year programs. So, but anyway, it was interesting to listen to him. Last thing we had was the woman who was the author of the Queen Bees and Wannabes. Her name is Rosalind Weissman. She's from Denver, Colorado, and she kind of wound up the whole thing. And her bailiwick is all about bullying for students and so forth. And so she talked about that from a board and point of view, what boards can do to try to help with the problems that students may have of bullying ideas. How to perhaps prevent, if possible, and so forth. I thought, and this is just me, a little bit of my own opinion, I thought her speech was a little bit more appropriate for teachers and students, more so than board members and administrators, quite frankly. And I told Dave, I think it sort of seemed like she fashioned one that she had for that and kind of pigeonholed it in here. Because I thought a lot of it was a little bit more for people in a classroom setting rather than a board setting. But she did have a couple points, and this is close with this. She said that when students and or teachers who are asking for help because there's some problems with bullying, she said we should keep in mind that asking for help is a sign of strength and not weakness, to make sure that we act upon that. The second point she made was to avoid bullying, and this goes for adults as well. She said one needs to be able to control their own lives and have some control over their own before, and then that way to avoid bullying others. And lastly, and I found this very interesting, and I don't know where it puts me personally, because the point she made was that women, especially, she said, feel marginalized when approaching board members. And it was an interesting statement, and I wrote it down because I thought, wow, don't know exactly what to make of that. But she was talking about incidences in her own situation in Denver area and school districts, and how many adult women, parents mostly, who she had talked to about problems, and many of them either intimidated or didn't want to talk to a board member. And she in her own research found that to be sort of interesting. So I just say that because for me it sort of said, well, maybe I ought to look at myself a little bit more carefully sometimes, because maybe that's the way it is, and need to be aware of that. So that's all I have to say.
That was great.
Well, do we all take credit for being at the convention? School visits, anybody, other than Pat?
I'll make this real excuse. I brought a book with me.
Wait a minute,
Okay, sorry.
ladies first.
Oh.
Okay, good idea.
Pat, you need to take some water or something.
I just went to the high school today, that was my assigned school, and had a brief, well, like 45-minute visit, but got a lot accomplished in that time. Went to Mr. Kronkowitz's government class, which to me is just a flashback. And I walked into his classroom, and there are all those government projects on the back wall that our kids did a gazillion years ago, and they're absolutely incredible. And the diversity of projects and the creativity, I just think is overwhelming. So again, it's such a great assignment for young people, because it allows them to do a project and use their own gifts, whichever way. Having said that, one of the most interesting ones, and he pointed it out, was this, it looked like a little picture of the American flag, just red, white, and blue, kind of like very simple outline, red, white, blue. And he said, do you like that? And I said, yeah. And in the center of it was a symbol that said $14 million. And he said that's how much the US government, the federal government pays to support municipal golf courses in our country. And he said if you go up and look closely at the picture, every golf course in the United States is listed, printed in itty bitty 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 print. And that was the outline of all the stars and stripes and the outline of the flag. It was absolutely incredible. The young man that did it is a golfer. So again, it was, you know, it was really neat to see how he encourages kids to explore different ways. They were studying the Bill of Rights, which was very interesting. Mrs. Abrahamson in Spanish, they were learning Spanish body parts and really enthused about it. And I asked them if they think Spanish is hard or easy, and most, not easy, but most of the class said that they enjoy it and they didn't find it that difficult. They were mostly freshmen and sophomores, and they said because they had taken it in middle school, they really felt prepared. In gym, they were playing basketball with huge baseball bats and like volleyballs or whatever. They were kicking those or hitting those things across the gym. It was really kind of fun. They were all having a good time. In ag science, Miss Lehman's class, they were studying international foods or food production. And so they were making muffins and biscuits and cinnamon rolls. And one table of, there were 7 young men and one lady at the table, and she was the one that was doing the stirring. The boys were standing there like this. Mr. Feld's class, he was speaking Greek. Literally. It was a calculus class. We had a really interesting discussion though, because he has his desks arranged in a different format now. They're in pods, like 3 or 4 in a pod. And they were preparing for a calc test, which is coming down Friday, I think, or Thursday, I don't know. And he said he's gone with a different, he's flip-flopped his way of teaching, where he used to do a presentation during class and then sending young people home with the homework to do on their own. And now he's done it the opposite way. And again, this is a trend in education, I think, where the students read the lesson at home, and then come back the next day and do problems in class so that they can get help on the problems. And so he has the class working together on the homework problems, and then if a problem is, one particular problem creates a problem, then he'll do it on the whiteboard. But he said, this way, he used to just be doing problems up on the board, and the kids weren't doing it. So this way it allows the students to do the work, and he's there to help. He said it's really been effective, and he likes it. He also was talking to them, which I think is a great idea. He allows them to have a sheet of paper and anything that they want to put on it for their exam thinking. And he said now most people would just think they would put formulas on it and whatever, but he said he encourages them to put the things that they need help with, the things that, the mistakes that they repeatedly make, to write a sentence and say, you know, I always do this, don't do this, blah, blah, blah. And so we talked about the value of that. And in the real world nowadays, that even when kids take some of the standardized testing, that they're given a sheet with formulas and whatever. And so we had a discussion with that with the class on how that makes sense, that in the real world, you have access to formulas and whatever you need to do a problem or whatever. So I think it adds a lot of stress to young people when they know they have to go in and take a big exam and not only remember all the formulas, that adds to the stress. So it was, I think it's a good technique and a good way. I wish they would have had it when I was in college. And the last was a bulletin board that I was absolutely amazed at on Main Street. And I don't know what class it was, but it was a science bulletin board, and it was called Junk Drawer Cells. Do you know what I'm talking about? And apparently the young people had to go into a junk drawer at home and take anything in the junk drawer that they could find and create a cell. So screws and rolls of tape and golf balls and whatever were the mitochondria and the nucleus and all the different parts of a cell. And it was so creative to see what they had done and how they had all created a cell using junk. And they had to explain why they chose, you know, a screw for this because of the shape, and why they chose tape because it can wrap around like DNA does and whatever. It was fascinating to see, again, how creative these young people are. And I guess I applaud the faculty for that, for nowadays, like you talked about in China. I think when we base so much on academics and everybody doing the same thing the same way, we're stifling creativity in young people. And I mean, it's been shown that kids learn in different ways. And so to give an assignment, for a teacher to give an assignment and say, explore this any way you would like, I applaud them. So, great staff, great visit. Thanks for what you do.
That was 45 minutes, you said?
Yeah, I move fast. Yeah, it's 45 minutes.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I actually did my school visit by going on a field trip. I went with Mr. Roger Larson and his AP students. We went to Edgar, Wisconsin, and we went to hear a speaker, about 35 or 40 students, I can't remember exactly the number, about that many. And the person we heard was a woman. Her name is Carlotta Walls. She's the author of this book, but more importantly, she is one of the Little Rock Nine during the Civil Rights era in 1957, was a landmark case, and she was one of the nine. This is her picture here, of course, when she was 14 years old, and she talked about her experiences, and really fascinating biography and background about an iconic situation. Those of you remember, of course, the Little Rock Nine were high school students who wanted to go to the Little Rock Central High School, and they were banned from going by the National Guard. The governor of the time, his name was Baucus, I think. Baucus, thank you. And he was a little bit like the George Wallace, who's, not on my watch, was not going to allow that school to be integrated while he was governor, so he sent the National Guard. It's interesting, she told some things that, of course, you don't get a chance to hear or read from the news reels and when they do documentaries on it. And one of them was, and I didn't realize this, I don't think it was even in the book, she said that when she was in 8th grade, she was in an all-black school, of course, separate but equal, and that's the way she had been brought up until 8th grade. Actually, the 9th grade, because it was a senior high school, so 10th, 11th, 12th was the high school. She was in 9th grade. And at the end of the school year, when she was in 9th grade, her homeroom teacher came in and sent a sheet of paper around and said, anybody who wants to go to Little Rock Central High School next year, put your name down, because there were some options. The other option would be the all-black school, which was named something else. And she put her name down. And she wanted to go there, she said, not because she was seeing it as some big historical event, she had no idea, but because it was a relatively new school and it had everything in terms of high schools at the time. It had big labs, it had wonderful music department, it had all the sports facilities, and so on and so forth. And she said, I was 14 years old. I was hoping, she was a pretty good student. She's a very well-spoken woman, by the way. She's got a pedigree of degrees from all kinds of universities today. But she said she thought she might want to be a doctor at that time. So she said, if I want to be a doctor, that's where I want to go to school. So she signed up. 49 students signed up to go to Little Rock Central the next fall. The first day of school for that momentous timetable, only 9 showed up. The other 40, either their parents or the intimidation factor or any number of reasons, they decided they weren't going to try it. And so the 9 students came, she and the other 8. They weren't all freshmen. Some were juniors and seniors. And they came to the door, and of course they were met by the National Guard, and they were turned away. They had to go home. They didn't make a big fuss that day, and then they were home for 3 weeks before President Eisenhower then called out the 101st Airborne, and he sent 1,200 troops who literally bivouacked right on the football field, tents. And on the 23rd, I think it was, of September, they were asked to come back to school, or allowed to come back, and then the 101st basically pushed aside, if you will, the National Guard and allowed them in. And the funny thing is, the interesting thing is, if you look at some of the old newsreels, they're kind of walking down the street, and you can see some of those things online now, of course. She said they actually went in, not at 8 o'clock in the morning when school started. They didn't come till about 9 o'clock in the morning because they wanted to miss everybody coming to school so that there'd be no student kind of confrontation outside. There were about 1,000 people outside the doors, in the front, mostly parents, who were not happy with this. And so they went in the back door, escorted in the back door. And as soon as the word got out that there were some African-American or black students coming in the back door, a number of white students started jumping out the windows in the front of the building, egged on by their parents, who pulled them out. She said, you don't see those pictures, they weren't really recorded at the time. But she said that was one of the things she said, that she couldn't believe people actually would do that, but they did. And the other thing she said, if you can imagine that whole year when she was 14 years old as a freshman, every time she went from her class, like Spanish to geometry, she was met at the door of her classroom with a military person, with a gun, with a fixed bayonet, and escorted to her next class. Every student, all 9 of them, every class. Now imagine that in the world we live in today where no guns are allowed, okay? And then they had armed soldiers on every floor and in every open space in the high school at all times.
We have a lot of people here that still have to talk tonight.
Okay.
I gotta be home by 9 o'clock.
Okay.
I
So-
mean, you know, I agree,
So anyway, the students, our students from Waupaca listened to her. She was a wonderful speaker. I think they had a great time, and it was quite a momentous occasion for all of them. At least their comments afterwards were really positive. So I was fortunate to be able to go along, and the kids, I think, were fortunate to be somebody pretty iconic in American history.
Thank you.
What an awesome opportunity.
Yeah.
I wonder how you found out about that.
There's a speaker at Edgar, a social studies teacher, who has a program called A Walk in Their Shoes, and he brings in people who are still living who have created historical events. He had some of the code talkers from World War II.
Oh, okay.
He had one of them. He had a Tuskegee Airman, one of the black fighters from World War II. He's had Holocaust victims or survivors. So he's got a program that he invites people to come.
Thanks, Beth.
Any others?
I didn't make a school visit, however, I did have the opportunity to go over to La Crosse and watch the high school dance team compete at state. As probably everybody has heard, they did have a three-peat. They took first in ball and in jazz. I would say there were roughly, this is just a very wild calculation, but 200 people from Waupaca there in support of the team, give or take a few, obviously, which I think is an outstanding number when you consider the distance and all. Obviously, a lot of were relatives, but there were other students there, and a lot of support. I've never seen that much controlled chaos in my life that I can recall. I don't know how many total teams were there. Do you have a feel for that, John, at all?
I believe Amy said last night at the recognition might have been 84 or 88.
84, 88 teams, and they're cycling them through for all the performances, and it was just really very, very well organized. Very proud, obviously, of our team and their accomplishments over the years, and again this year, and it was my pleasure to be able to go over and observe.
We were at the Wheelhouse for lunch, and there had to be 55, 60 people that all of a sudden came in, and it was pandemonium.
They're kind of a cult. They travel together, they kind of dress alike.
Oh, yeah. But they were all happy.
A lot of talent.
We are,
This is not related to that, but it is in a way. They're February 20th and 21st, I think. Is that just the 20th is the one day at high school? The dance?
Just this one.
The Saturday.
Yeah.
We are hosting and it's not dance, it's cheer. It's a cheer contest,
Right.
which is separate from dance, but it's cheer leaders, so to speak. And we are expecting approximately 700 people into Waupaca for that event on that Saturday. So you see a lot.
21st.
The 21st?
Yeah, because
Okay.
14th is Saturday, so it's.
Okay, 21st will be So if you see a lot of people in Waupaca, that's what they're here for. We don't have anyone competing in that contest, but it is being used as a fundraiser for a number of events, or a number of groups in the school to raise money for us hosting that event.
Is that high school age?
Yes.
It is. We're a great central location, so it was a great opportunity for our dance team to host that event. They'll be working a concession stand, and they get to keep all the profits from that, so they expect to make a lot of money that day.
If
Playing
you-
off of concession stands and your visit to Mr. Feld's room, I was at the girls' basketball game, I don't remember which one it was, but one of them in the last couple of weeks, and the National Honor Society was running the concession stand, and I walked over, I hadn't had any chance to stop at home to eat, so I thought I'd have a nice dinner there, and nobody was there to, give me my popcorn and M&Ms or whatever I was gonna have for dinner. I looked around the corner and there was Mr. Feld with two of the students at a table preparing for an exam. And they got up and then served and went back to study for the exam that they had coming up. So I thought that was rather interesting that they were manning the booth as well as studying for this exam.
Good order them.
So where are we now?
We're up to committee reports, Finance Committee.
Finance Committee met last night, February 9th. We had the opportunity to get the audit report from Mr. Hayek in reviewing the 2013-14 audited financial statements and the recommendations of the audit firm with regard to financial institution deposits. Mr. Hayek presented a debt summary for us, looking at the opportunity to refund a portion of our debt before the end of the school year. We also went through Mr. Hayek's presentation of long-range facility plans. I will not go into detail on those, but obviously with our facilities aging, some of the mechanicals with those facilities are also starting to reach what would be projected as their life of operation, so we'll have to be obviously taking that into consideration as we prepare our budgets going forward. He also gave a brief update on the Affordable Care Act. However, when I say update, that would probably be, he offered some questions to which there weren't answers, I guess would be the better way to put it. The meeting adjourned approximately 1 hour later.
David?
Future dates, February 26th, 27th, the WSB Legal and Human Resources Conference in Stevens Point. I know that Pat has signed up for that. Anyone else interested, let Carol know and you'll get signed up as well. March 10th will be our regular school board meeting, again at 5:45 p.m. And March 18th is WSB Day at the Capitol in Madison. So if anyone's interested in attending that, let us know. We'll get you registered. That takes us to the second Friday in January count. Enrollment count, and you saw the numbers. So I think you can see there, the numbers we'll hear more later on from the W4K, but we have 128 students in 4K this year. The change in number of students from the September count to the January count was approximately 9 students. We lost a total of 9. And most of that came in the sophomore year. The largest drop was 8 students in the sophomore year, and I'm not sure why that is. Those wouldn't be fifth-year seniors. They would show up in the senior class probably. So don't know why that is, but a little bit of a one that stands out. Typically, there is a change from September count to January count, as you can tell on the chart from one year to the next. Any questions on that? That then takes us to board monitoring. And Ms. Hare and Ms. Marcon, can you do the introductions?
We know that you've been all wondering how 4K is going, and we say it's nice and rosy, but we wanted you to see some concrete examples, and so they put together a little slideshow. These are the instructors from all the sites in the community, and some of the directors as well. Little slideshow with actual kids and a little bit about the curriculum and how it's going.
Hello, my name is Molly Harris. I'm the teacher over at Tiny Treasures. We have many teachers here with you guys today. Thank you very much for having us. We're very excited to be here. Our locations are at the Chain of Lakes, the Learning Center, at Sunny Day, at Tiny Treasures, and at Head Start and the WLC. We are community-based, so we do have a couple locations within the school, but we do have many spread throughout the town, which is really great. And each site has still able to maintain their personality, and we have many advantages to being in the places that we're at. So we're very excited about that. All right, our 4K program goes off with a creative curriculum. Was that August? We all got together and kind of were introduced to the curriculum that came in a huge box, and everything that's listed up there was what was in the box. It came with 6 teaching guidelines, which I'll go into detail in the next slide. But the teaching guidelines are kind of a whole booklet. I actually have one here from the beginning of the year. They go through, they have lesson plans in them, and then it goes through and gives you different daily support things that you need and questions you can ask and just a whole bunch of stuff like that. So I'll pass that around if you want to take a look at that. And then each thing has an intentional teaching card, the curriculum. An intentional teaching card is kind of a different way to engage the kids in different activities. It'll tell you what you need for that activity, how to do it, the questions to ask, and then it also tells you the objectives which you reach at that time, which is nice because you know exactly what you're going for and the end result of what you'll get after that activity. It also includes Mighty Minutes, which are these little cards right here. There are almost, I think there's over 100 of these cards, and in the intentional teaching guides, it tells you week by week what cards you can use. These are used as a way to fill any minute of downtime, because all those minutes start to add up and you lose a lot of time. And these cover so many different things, from rhyming and literacy stuff to math and letter knowledge and a whole bunch of different things. And these are nice too because they also tell you what to do. They tell you the objectives that you're hitting, and they tell you how you can add on to it and kind of do more with those things. So I'll pass those around too. I also have one of the intentional teaching cards. This is one of the math ones. We also have book discussion cards, which go along with the book collection. Each study that we have contains a whole bunch of books that goes with it, and it has to do with the topic, which we'll see the topics in a minute, but it goes along with each topic, and then the discussion cards allow you to ask different questions and how to expand it, and then just different things that you can do with the book to keep the kids engaged and active and all of that. And then, let's see here. There's also a classroom resources CD. You can pop it into the computer, and it gives you a whole bunch of different stuff that you can use for families and for the classroom. It gives you examples of newsletters and different family activities that you can do, so you're not just kind of left on your own with that. So it takes a lot of stress out of it, but it still gives you that advantage that if you want to do your own thing that you can, but it's there for the help that you need. A part of the creative curriculum too is a lot of the family involvement. We need a lot of family involvement hours throughout the year.
87.5.
Yes, 87.5 hours to get families involved in their children's learning, or in their child's learning. So we've done a few things already. We've done a folktale night as a whole with every 4K classroom, and each classroom does a different things as well. Leah and I got together and did a family pumpkin night at the Miller's Pumpkin Farm, and had the families come out to that. I know Leah also did a night at the library. So it's just different ways to get involved in your children's learning. And you can see the pictures up there from the folktale night, where each site chose a folktale, and we read the story, and then each story had an activity to do. All right, you can change that one. All right, these are the studies that we have. The studies are broken up into 6-week periods. The beginning of the year one's kind of longer, just because it takes a while to get the kids introduced to the classroom and introduced to their friends and the teachers and get into the swing of things. So it was a longer one, but it was nice to have, and I think it made the teachers and the students feel a lot more comfortable in the 4K. After that, we did a tree study, which was a lot of fun. It taught the kids a lot about different types of trees, different parts of the trees, and it gave us different activities to do with trees, like printing. I know I took my kids outside and we stuck paper out on a tree and started rubbing the crayons on them to make prints like that. And we brought leaves inside and stuck them, we taped them all over the table and printed on top of those too, so they loved that. After that, we did clothing. For the clothing unit, we focused on things like how it was made, where it was made, what types of clothes are for what. And then we're currently in our building study, which seems to be a favorite for my class. I'm not sure about yours, but it's definitely put a lot of use to building with the different materials that we have in the classroom, even the materials you wouldn't expect to be used for building, like animals and just different things like that, but they love it. And then our upcoming ones, we have falls and recycling, and next year we will be adding to the studies, and we're getting a pets curriculum guide. All right. The curriculum has an overall objectives to hit with all the kids, and it is typical for this age group. So we have the social emotional, and that is just to make sure that the kids can regulate their emotions and their behavior, and then create and sustain relationships with their friends. And then there's physical with their traveling skills and their balance and their gross and fine motor. We want to make sure that their language is on top of where it should be, along with all the other areas of development with the cognitive, the literacy, the math, the social studies, and the arts. All right. We do different assessments daily. I know I'm always busy with them. There's never a moment where you're not assessing a child. So we do daily observations, and I know I keep a notebook full of notes that I have, and I'll write the dates down on there just so I have some hard evidence when I come to a problem, or even just to show a parent how well a child's doing, that they can see what day and what they were doing and everything. So it's very helpful. That also kind of goes along with the Teaching Strategies Gold. That is part of a website that you can go into, and you click on the child that you're working with, and it brings up each and every objective, and you can add pictures and videos and a whole bunch of other stuff, and it's really nice to have. That right now is currently optional, and I know a lot of us are using it just for kids that we really want to make sure we're monitoring for most of the time. We also use PALS. We do that twice a year, and then we do it, there's the optional winter one. And it's nice to have that too in the winter, just to kind of keep up with the assessments. Then we do the report cards, which just went out, and our report cards are based off of the gold strategies. So it's kind of helpful too to have all of that backup to go through when you're ready for your report cards. And then each site also does conferences, and they're not necessarily all at the same time.
Can I ask a question about PALS?
Oh yeah,
Is it the same test you administer,
it is.
Yes.
and then do you administer it again for kindergarten entry?
It's a totally different questions that they're getting and different things they're covering. But it is the statewide test for K through second grade now.
So they get it at middle of the year, and then end of the year, and then again prior to entering kindergarten, or?
No, they get it at the beginning,
Like in
fall and
October,
spring of every year.
Okay, thank you.
It's very similar.
It is similar,
It's
but
very
it
similar to
changes a lot by
kindergarten.
the time you get to second grade, which is good.
Oh.
Can I ask a question about report cards?
Oh,
What-
yeah.
What kind of report, what's on your report card?
Our report card covers different of the objectives that we have. It goes over math skills that they do to make sure that they can count. We want to be able to make sure that they can count to 20. Kind of matching different things to the numbers to their quantities and being able to count objects. And then their writing skills, where they're at with writing their names and recognizing letters. It also goes over their gross motor and fine motor skills, and then
Social emotional.
social emotional. Yep, thank
Do
you.
you give a grading scale, or do you just pick comments?
There is a grading scale right now. It's based off of the numbers again. We are planning on changing that for next year though, because our numbers kind of go against what the kindergartens go against. So where our kids should be at like
It's a
five.
developmental range that goes from 1 to 8 of development of average children. And so your child, it'll give you a shaded area. This is average development. This is where your child is. It's a developmental range.
You can see it
However,
on one of those cards, so that,
Oh, yeah.
so that a parent knows what skills need to be achieved before they can actually write their name when it comes to fine motor. Like, you can't really expect a child who has no fine motor skills to be able to write letters if they haven't. So
Achieve
it has that continuum for each of the objectives. So parents also can see the steps involved.
starting in kindergarten, it's a 1 through 4 rubric. Not that we would change the 4K to 1 through 4, because it still needs to be a developmental range. They can't be graded in the same way that the other students were expected to be at a certain standard, because they're still in developmental ranges.
And you give your report cards on the same schedule as all the other grade levels?
Yes.
All right, we're gonna go into introducing you to each of the sites, and I'm gonna start off with Tiny Treasures. My 4K program is only in the afternoons. I do that because I have 3-year-olds in the morning, which is kind of a nice way to break up my day, but I love the 4K program. I have 16 students, and it's equally divided. I have 8 boys and 8 girls, and I have 1 student with an IEP, and he is in a speech program, which is really wonderful because Kelly Baumgart comes out and helps him twice a week, and he loves that, and all the other kids wish that she could spend time with them as well. We have a lot of benefits to being right in town. We've used a lot of the resources in town already, which we love about the community-based program. Instead of having the fire trucks come to our school, we were able to go to the fire station to see the fire trucks there and talk with different firemen and all of that. We also go to the library every once in a while, and we also do a lot of walks around town. For our building study, we just went on a walk yesterday and looked at all the different materials that the buildings were made out of, and we looked at what types of buildings we saw, and they got a kick out of that. They really loved it, and it's nice to have that right by us. We also do keep to what we've been doing for a long time. We offer a religious education enrichment program, and that is offered on Tuesdays and Thursdays in between my morning class and the afternoon class. So they come in out of school hours, and it's something that I just volunteer for. And we plan different Bible stories that we do with the kids. So it is still separate from the school, but they are offered it at the beginning of the year if they would like to come in to do that. And right now I have 6 kids in that program. And if you look at that, thank you. We added some pictures just so you can see kind of what our days are like. Up on the left corner there, we have our wipe-off board. At the beginning of every study, I go through with the kids and see kind of the things that they want to learn or do with each study. That was from our clothing study, so you can see they wanted to do different things like make a clothesline and hang up clothes on there. They wanted to make clothes and do different things, and we were able to do almost all of that stuff with all the ideas that they had come up with, which is great because it is very play-based and child-centered. So we take their ideas and show them that what they want to do is possible. Right next to that is the hat that they made. They were given different materials and told that they can do whatever they want, and many of the kids were able to add that little pom-pom to the top because that's what they have on their hats, and the strip across the bottom. So they had a lot of fun with that. On the right-hand side, you can see some of our kids hanging up the clothes after they washed it. We have a washer and dryer that they use, and then use their fine motor skills to use those clothespins and hang them up. Down on the left-hand side, you can see from our tree unit, the kids learned about the different parts to a tree. So I volunteered a snack helper that day, and I brought in snack, and I brought in pretzel rods and little teeny pretzel sticks, and then grapes and the Twizzler strings, and told them that they had to create all the pieces to a tree. And they had a lot of fun playing with their food because we don't usually let them do that. But as you can see, they all came up with all the different parts to the tree and were able to put it in the exact order. And I still the middle there, that was from Halloween, the day I took that picture, so we have a gold elephant right there. In our sand and water table, I put different pieces of a tree. I went on a walk one day and got branches and twigs and moss and a whole bunch of other stuff. I was even able to pull out a little sapling pine tree, which was hard for me to do. And the kids were very upset that I did it, but they loved learning about it. And seeing right there in front of them how the roots go up to the trunk and then go spread out to each branch and to the pine. And then on the lower right-hand side, that was an activity that was actually provided in this teaching guide, and it was teaching kids about different types of art. And there they were taking pieces of tissue paper and creating an apple. And then up on the left, sticking again to what our preschool had in its traditions before we became part of the 4K, we do a trick-or-treating on Halloween and go around to the offices in the church building. It's just a fun thing to kind of break up their day and have fun and celebrate. And then in the middle there was another activity provided from the teaching guide, and we took shaving cream and sprayed it all over the tables, and they were shown letters so that they had to copy into the shaving cream, and then they would kind of rub it out, and then we'd give them a letter sound, and they'd have to write out what letter they thought created that sound, so it was a lot of fun. And it was nice to see too how some of the letters, like C and K, have the same sound, to see which child drew the C and which one drew the K. Up on the right-hand corner there, you can see that is our outdoor area, which the kids love and definitely get to put their gross motor development to show. And then down on the left-hand side, we turned our sand and water table again into a cutting area where they practice cutting and doing a lot of fine motor skills over there. In the middle, that was from our trip to the fire station, which they had a lot of fun. And it was just, again, nice to get out into our community. And then down on the right-hand side, you can see the kids there are cutting up pieces of yarn. That was also an activity from one of the teaching guides, and it was teaching the kids about long, short, and medium length and things like that. So they were cutting different lengths of yarn, and we also did it with Play-Doh and with blocks and with white boards. So it's a lot to do, but they love it and they love getting involved. And then Sunny Day's gonna come up.
Molly for putting this together. She did the whole PowerPoint, so thanks. So I'm Teresa Bulwark. I am a 4K teacher at Sunny Day. And the morning I have 21 students. There are 11 boys, 10 girls in the morning. The afternoon I have 18, and there's 7 boys and 11 girls. So very different classes, as you can imagine. And some of the objectives, I mean, we all have the same objectives. You know, I teach from the same curriculum, as Molly had said. And I just listed these objectives because this is my first year teaching, and I'm just already excited to see the improvements that they've made already, even though some, you know, are really, you know, so much different. You know, they're all so different. But the ages, some just turned 4 in August, and some just turned 5 in August. So you can imagine it's quite a range of abilities. A few, you know, they could write their name, they knew their last name, and some just, you showed them their names, you know, and they could not pick them out. They had no idea, and they would panic. I don't know, you know, and for like 6 weeks, they were like, I don't know which one, you know, is this, you know, they pick their name, and they still have to check with you and say, is this the right one, you know? But now they're confident, they know their, you know, they know their routine, they can find their name, they're writing their name every day. Some still have a hard time with it, and some are beyond that. Self-help skills is a big one. Can they put their outdoor clothing on? So for the clothing unit, we had a chart, and we said, okay, you get a sticker, can you put your coat on? Can you zip it? Can you put your boots on? And your mittens, you know, so those are all goals. And of course, alphabet number recognition, that's a big one. some students started out knowing the alphabet, you know. We start with uppercase, and if they know uppercase, then we start with the lowercase, and some already know everything. So I added a word of the week. So now we're at, you know, for those kids that are ready, we're doing a word of the week, but then I found out even the ones that really are still learning their letters, they are having fun with the word of the week because I put it into a song and we have movements to it. So if you gotta put everything to a song and have a movement for everything because they always want to do everything. And so we're working on small, large motor skills. Language development would include following directions. You know, usually they can follow one direction, but can they follow two? You know, it's a challenge. So, and then we have the mystery bag, which is a good language activity. They take home a bag, and we have a letter of the week. So every day, 2 bags go home, and it has the letter of the week on it, and they have to bring something back that starts with that letter. And they absolutely love, they are so excited when they get to take the mystery bag home and come back and stand up in front of the class and share. And just the confidence you can see is building in them. You know, before it was like you could hardly hear them, and now they're up there and you can hear them, and they're speaking clearly. So I just think it's really making a difference. You know, the program is great. Sunny day, a good
Do the parents
event.
ever call you and tell you what a great job you're doing with their children? Or they must be just ecstatic.
Yeah, well, we had the conferences, you know, after the first quarter, and a lot of them were very encouraging. They said, I know Tracy is here, she's my assistant in the room with me. And yeah, we heard a lot of great comments. They're already, you know, because we do a lot with rhyming, because that's a pre-literacy skill. You know, that's a good indicator that they'll have the skills needed to read. And they're already, you know, they came home and all of a sudden they're rhyming. And you know, so we do a lot of rhyming songs and stuff. So yeah, we get a lot of positive feedback. A lot of times we don't hear much back at all. So sunny day is really nice too, because only about 4 at the most per class take a bus. Otherwise, they're already there. So you don't have to bus all the kids there and bus them back. They're there, they go to a different room. You know, some of the children need naps, so they go in the morning, and they can have their nap still in the afternoon. And so it's nice that they aren't bussed all over, you know, sitting on a bus for an hour. So I think that's nice. And peace of mind for the parents that they aren't worried about their child, you know, getting on the right bus. So I think, well, this was just an example of movements that we do. It's, one of the objectives is letter sounds, like initial sounds, and I have flashcards. We do this a lot, and they hold this up, and there's a motion, you know, T, they go like this, and then there's a song that goes with it, so we're doing song and movements, and, you know, helps them to remember, and they make it fun, so they don't really even know that they're learning, but, so it's really fun. Oh, yeah, okay. Kind of small. The upper left corner, that's our group, where we sit, you know, for large group time. Kind of hard to see. I have a big 4 and 5 on the wall, and they all put, beginning of the year, they put their name on how old they were. So if they were 4, they all put it. And so that's a big deal. We celebrate birthdays a lot. Birthdays are a big deal, and when they turn 5, they get to take their name off and put it on the 5, and that's very exciting. And the middle one, that is when we talked about trees, like Molly was talking about. Tracy made this gigantic life-size tree in the room, and they got to, you know, hang things on it, you know, neat things to put on the tree on the wall. So that was fun. We have the calendar time in the upper right corner. upper right, we have the writer of the day, and so they practice writing their letter and number. So that's kind of a big deal, they get to go on the whiteboard. And then the bottom left is snack time. Sunny Day provides a meal, that's another advantage. They count it as breakfast, right? So the children don't have to bring a snack. They aren't, so it's one less thing for parents to have to remember too. The snack is provided, there's a wonderful cook, and she, makes sure it's nutritional, and they all get the same thing. And so that's really nice. That was a little party that we had. My daughter dressed up as Anna for Frozen party. That's a big deal.
Very
That
big.
movie. They're all obsessed.
Really?
So that was fun, so. Head start. Oh, I didn't, okay. Those are some learning centers, library. We try to change up the centers to make it interesting. You gotta be changing toys constantly or they're going to get bored. And so the upper right is our library center. Sunny Day also has themes. So along with the curriculum theme, they change their theme, every week or so. So it's kind of fun to do Sunny Day's theme. That was a farm theme, so I brought in a wagon with hay. And then we have, of course, the kitchen area they all like playing in. The middle is they were building with blocks. The bottom left, cleanup time. We encourage them to do all the cleanup. So sometimes to say, okay, we're going to take your picture. If they're not cleaning up, and say, you get your picture if you're cleaning up. So that's why they were cleaning up. So yeah, and then the bottom, they were making some things for Christmas. So that's the end of my picture. Okay.
And just to add, we have Rhonda Melby here too, who is the director of Sunny Day.
I'm Cece Falk. I'm the classroom manager and the 4K teacher at Waupaca Head Start. Currently, we only have a PM 4K class with 13 students. Head Start has been using the creative curriculum for many, many years. This is our first year with the study, so also it's a fairly new thing, but all of the objectives and things and the goal strategies we've been working with for many years. So some of the advantages, because our day, the kids come in, they come in off the bus. We have our large group time. And then we have lunch. We do have lunch with our children every single day. Then they have to brush their teeth, and we do our small groups. That's when we use our intentional teaching cards. So I'll work with 2 or 3 children and working on those skills. And it's kind of nice to be able to just work with 2 or 3 children at a time, because then you can really scaffold their learning, having their peers work with them. While I'm working with them, I have 2 other staff that work with me in the classroom every day, and they are working with their choice time. We call it our study and play time, because with the studies, they're always exploring new things. After that, then we'll have our cleanup time, and we have our story time, and we go outside every day. Before we go outside, we have snacks, so we have that advantage. Also working with Head Start, we do have a nutrition consultant, and we have, Christy, help me out, because I'm trying to blank.
We have a mental health consultant,
Thank you.
nutrition consultant.
Christy's 3-big director at Head Start.
Yes. Yeah. So we have a lot of special people that can come in and work with our kiddos if we're seeing any issues or anything. We also have the big family. They talk about the 87.5 hours. Well, that's already built into Head Start. Every month we have a family gathering. As a matter of fact, ours is tonight. We have the UW Extension coming in doing a nutrition activity with our parents and our children. We also do family activity forums. We do home visits twice a year, so I get the advantage of going into the homes and working with the parents as well as the children to show them ways at home that they can extend their learning. So, I think it's great that 4K includes that family involvement piece, because I think sometimes as we get in the upper grades, that kind of gets pushed aside because we have so much testing and learning and other things to do. So I think that's a really good advantage. Some of the pictures from my class. The first picture, they were building. This also shows a social and emotional skill because that's the foundation. You know, our goal is to get these children ready for kindergarten, and your social and emotional skills are the basis for that. They were working on a disagreement, and we were trying to see how far they would go, and they were actually really good about talking it out about who got to knock down the building and whose turn it was to put more blocks on there. Our tree study, we had a family member donate a tree, and the children all voted on the name. His name is Bonsai because in our study we learned bonsai means tree in a pot. And since he's a tree in a pot, he's still with us in our classroom. On the bottom, during the beginning of the year study, they encouraged us to have other school employees come in. So our cook came in and did a whole activity with the children about nutrition. She gave them all a really nice hairnet, and they got to play a game. They were very excited to get their picture taken with Miss Maddie. And she's also a master gardener, so the next picture in our tree study, she actually went on the smartboard with the children in the computer, and they learned about their favorite tree, which is a rainbow eucalyptus tree. So they were getting those study skills that you wouldn't normally think 4-year-olds can do, and they actually did a really good job learning about how when the bark peels off, it turns different colors, and how is that different than our bark, and they did a really good job with that. So, and I think there's one more slide of pictures. The one in the upper left corner, that is our family gathering. We had a multicultural night. We had Dale Doty come in to the rec center, and he did some wonderful music. As a special treat, he even let the children sing Let It Go in his microphone. And the parents were dancing with their children and just having a great time. We had different activity stations set up, and it's always a favorite for them to come in and do that. The next two pictures, at the end of our tree study, at the end of each study, they encourage us to do a culminating event. It celebrates our learning, and they really encourage involving parents. So we had parents come in, the children made an invitation for their parents. It's like, come and see what I learned about trees. And we had grandparents come in, and we had parents come in, and the children took their parent from station to station and showed them everything we learned, because it was up over every single wall. Some of the pictures we took when we went to the nature preserve across the street, where on their clipboards they draw a picture of the tree, and then they got to come back and paint it, and they could show, this is what I learned about a tree. These are all the things that come from trees. They walked around the classroom, and we taped everything on the bulletin board that was made out of wood. Even chocolate candy bar wrappers that somebody brought in, because chocolate comes from trees. And then the last picture again is our multicultural night, and that's my little friend Zayden singing Let It Go. It's his favorite song, so. And thank you.
All right, I'm Leah Fletcher, and I am at the Chain Lakes Elementary School in the morning, and I have 20 students in that class. And then I'm at the Learning Cottage Daycare in the afternoon, and I have 12 students in that class. Some of the benefits, because I can see both sides, I'm in the community center, and then I'm also in a school setting. With the chain at the school, students get a chance to be with older kids and be in the actual school building, and they actually get to go to special classes like art and music and library. And at the daycare, they're there, like Teresa said, they're there so they don't need the busing if they don't need it, and the parents have less to worry about because they're all there all day, so there's no need to worry about going other places. This is just some of us in action. The top left, we had at the chain a 4K concert in the holidays, so that's a 4K concert. The middle top is just the kids in a center playing with each other and interacting. The top right picture is us when we made Play-Doh. We made Play-Doh together. The bottom is my afternoon class, and that's when we made Play-Doh. And the middle bottom is a picture of us working together doing a puzzle. We read about Humpty Dumpty, so we were doing a Humpty Dumpty puzzle then. And then the bottom right is a picture of some of the artwork that they did. We made a friendship quilt, so they all got to be creative and make their own piece of the quilt.
Leah, just a question.
Yes.
Will your 20 students who are at the chain school, will they all, assuming they don't move, Will they all be at the chain school then next year?
Not necessarily.
Not
We did,
necessarily.
when they registered, you know, kind of put that out there that 5K is based on where they live. So, you know, think about when you're picking your 4K site, if you live over there, chances are good you'll stay at chain 5K, but it's not necessary.
But it's not mandatory.
Hello, I'm Jenny Peterson. I'm the 4K teacher at the Waupaca Learning Center. I have been a 4K teacher at the Learning Center for the last 8 years, and I taught Title I 4K, which I'm so excited to have this open enrollment 4K program. I love having all my colleagues to bounce ideas off of. I love that we have a cohesive curriculum that we're all working on, and we're all individualized, but yet we're all really kind of doing the same thing. And I love that the kids are coming into kindergarten with this level playing ground, that they've all had the same kind of experiences, and they're all going to enter kindergarten with the same opportunities. So I'm really, really excited about teaching in this area. My classroom, I have 18 students in the morning. I have 17 in the afternoon. I also have the early childhood children integrated into my classroom. So many of my students have IEPs, which means I do have a little extra support in the classroom. I have a few more adults working in there because we have a lot of one-on-one situations, and we're constantly differentiating our curriculum to meet the needs for each one of those students. So. These are just a few examples of some activities that we have going on in the classroom. I think a few of my colleagues here have mentioned the mystery bag, and this is one of the little girls that brought home the mystery bag. The letter of the week was S, so she put her mystery bag, her slipper inside the bag and gave some clues to the kids and said, it starts with the letter S, it's fuzzy, it keeps your feet warm, and then the kids have to guess what's inside the bag, and it's really a fun activity. I think the curriculum has really given us a lot of leeway and a lot of good ideas for different activities to reach all the kids. And it's things that they're familiar with. So it's really been, I think, a really good experience so far for all of us. And you've been so helpful because you've done it for so long, so that helps too. So I think that's about all I have to say. Does anyone else have questions about the 4K program?
I have. What do you think is going to happen when they go to kindergarten? Does that curriculum change because of what they've gone through in the year before? And do you anticipate, you know,
They're smarter.
They're smarter. Well, I understand what you're saying.
they're more programmed
Well.
and they're ready to learn more. I
Well-
think they've got the feel of it, I would think.
What I feel is that we want to keep 4K a play-based, more of a social-emotional kind of we don't want to have it turn into a kindergarten classroom. And that's kind of what happened once kindergarten became a full day. They had said, you know, we don't want kindergarten to turn into first grade. Well, kindergarten is essentially first grade now. You know, they're doing all of those same activities since they become full-time. So I think we want to keep 4K as more of a social experience. And, you know, we're introducing all of those concepts, but it's not as an aggressive a curriculum as kindergarten.
But the kids are more apt to,
They're more excited about
more,
learning.
yeah,
They,
okay.
you know,
It'll take less time at the beginning of the year.
Year
for
to-
Yeah.
orientation.
Because you're building
I
that
think they
foundation.
come in, right, where they can sit a little better, they can listen, they can walk down the hall. It's not so much the academics that they're that much more advanced in, but it's those social kind
Can you
of.
listen to a story?
It's
Can
not
you say?
babysitting.
Oh,
And-
absolutely.
Oh, no.
And so, most of those kids have, if we didn't have that, it would be in a babysitting,
Correct.
situation, and it depends on who the babysitter is and what they do with them. But now you've got a curriculum for these kids, and they're all gonna be going into kindergarten with you know, some kind of structure. And I think that's
I think the
thing that
important
makes
thing
us.
is that in 4K, they learn about expectations and they have this routine. And so they have these rules that they need to follow, or, you know, which aren't walking feet, inside voices. But they're starting to regulate that and to know that there are some boundaries, you know, that you don't run all over the place, you know, some guidelines. And I think that helps them once they get, because the thing that we see is parents we see more challenging behaviors, but if they have those specific guidelines or those expectations, you know, every time you do this, this will happen, or, you know,
They're more
follow through.
prepared.
Yeah, but I think they're more prepared. You know, they have this idea of what school is and what learning is, and they have these things that they want to learn about, and how do we find out those answers? You know, more so than, you know, that rote learning, that they can learn some of that in their everyday world.
As a school board member, you know, it's really exciting to listen to what's happening now in pre-kindergarten, how it gets the kids ready for kindergarten. And it goes right up the ladder as the years go by, and they've just got a better start, and fresh start, or whatever you call it.
Foundation.
Oh, yeah, it's exciting, and, you know, I think I love listening to all this, because it's,
I think one of the things too is that in early childhood, we celebrate those small successes with children at this age. So, oh my goodness, you wrote the first letter of your name, give me a high five, you know, and that's like, hey, I wanna learn that second letter. You know, it's like, hey, learning can be fun, you know,
It builds their confidence. I just
Yeah.
think of so many of my students who, they're like, I can't, I
Yeah,
don't
I
know,
can't.
and now they have confidence.
and how do you
Yeah, I
guys
just
sleep
think-
at night? When you think
We're
about
tired.
what's happening,
Yeah.
you're tired, yeah.
It's been a long day.
But you've gotta be, just excited for what these kids are doing.
It's very
At
exciting.
such a young age, and it's getting them ready quicker, and, that's so neat.
Parents will say that kids at home will say, their kids will tell them, use your walking feet or inside voices, like, you know,
You know, even when I
small
have-
kids become the parent.
And you know, I have parents that come to me and say, and, you know, I do have the advantage, I get to see the parents a little bit more, but I have parents that come in and tell me, you know why? They sat down and wrote their name. I didn't even know they knew how to hold a pencil, you know, because, you know, they see it. And that's what's great, is because we do hear about, you know, it's not just something they did in isolation in my classroom. They took it home and they learned it. And having the family involvement piece is amazing, because then you can help give parents those skills to keep reinforcing that at home. You know, what can we do to get my child ready for that step to kindergarten? What can we be doing to reinforce what you're doing at school? So that whole big picture, and looking at that whole child and not just that child in isolation in our classroom, is amazing.
Do the parents ever tell you problems that their kids are having, that, you know, that, hey?
Oh, yes.
And that helps you to channel them in the right way?
Right, you know, you'll say, you know, and we do family activity forms every month, and I give 3 individualized activities for each child to work on throughout that month with their parents. And they record their hours and things on there. And I'll have parents write comments, because I have a comment section on there. You know what, we were doing this activity and I noticed she really can't cut very well. Could you send some activities home for this? So making the parents aware that, yeah, cutting might be important next year, you know, or even, you know, they got this down, what can I do next? You know, they know all the letters. What can we work on next? Well, let's start working on those letter sounds, or let's start working on this. And they come to you and they ask you for your advice, and they want you to help them to help their child, so.
We have some other questions.
Rhonda, what percentage
what percentage of
We don't know
four-year-olds?
how many are out there.
The possible,
We-
yes.
I don't think we know, do we know that? Maureen?
No, no,
Every-
I think
every
we'll find
student-
that out next year when they enroll in kindergarten.
Right now, we're getting ready for the registration for next year. So Patty will be looking at census records, siblings, and advertising, and just taking phone calls and registering, but we don't know an exact number of how many there are versus how many are.
We can estimate.
Yeah, but Betty, if you look at it, like right now in our 4K, we have 128 students enrolled, and what is the kindergarten classroom at right now? 150. Yeah, so, you know, we're reaching a really high percentage of them,
For
so.
the first year, I think
Yeah.
that.
For first year,
Yeah.
that's really fabulous. Yeah.
Has it grown through the year? Have people said, hey, this sounds like a good idea, we'd like to register too?
I think this next year, we're gonna see an increase in 4K enrollment
We
because
just
of the
had
success
three
that we've
more.
had this year.
We
Yeah,
just had three
yeah.
more
Yeah.
registered
We just had
last
3
week.
new students.
Lots of times parents might say, well, I'm not gonna send them at the beginning of the year, but now,
Mhm.
I think they feel more confident about it. I think initially, because it came on a little bit faster than we had all expected, I think that there was a lot of fear in putting a child on a bus or even having them in this program that we didn't know anything about. And now that they've seen it, and especially in facilities that a lot of families are comfortable with already and how it's working, I think that it's really opened eyes to a lot of parents, and I think it's gonna follow through for this next year. I know that at Sunny Day, we have a lot of open enrolled students that come in from different school districts that use Sunny Day as their 4K place. And I foresee that happening again this next year, because we've already had parents ask us about it that will be willing to open enroll from other districts to come into Sunny Day and use our facility. So I'm sure that you're gonna see that in the other places
Yeah,
too.
that's a good point. Not all these 128 are our students. There are a number coming from other districts, so.
Has the 4K riding the bus been an issue at all?
no, we haven't.
Hasn't?
We have lots of adults out at the transfer site, and they know exactly, take them by the hand and take them to their
But even
bus.
what goes on a bus,
Mhm.
it hasn't been.
They're always in the front.
Uh-huh.
I haven't gotten, I can't think of a single phone call. Have you, Lee?
Yeah, the drivers try to work with the youngest ones, always, you know, keep close. Yeah, obviously, there's gonna be some language,
Mhm.
that kids are gonna overhear something that they
Yeah.
shouldn't hear,
Yeah.
but it's, I think it's relatively easy.
But Lee, the language might be coming from the 4-year-olds.
Did you have a question? No. Sandy?
I just want to add, I think that it's a plus that we as administrators meet on a monthly basis for some networking, to talk about, you know, especially at the beginning, to work out some of the kinks. And the 4K teachers all get together once a month for networking. And I think that, you know, says in itself that, you know, we're here to work together, to bounce ideas off, you know, what's happening, and planning these family events together to show that the community is, you know, really together making this happen.
Do the 4K teachers ever get to interact with the kindergarten teachers? I mean, to compare notes, or, I know it's the first year and, you know, things
Well,
are still working out.
4K teachers are invited to all of our in-service days.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes they're able to come, sometimes they have daycare responsibilities, or it depends on the site.
Yeah.
But at other times, I think they were planning some of the registration days together. There's some limited interaction, but it depends on the building they're into.
Dave, have we as a district sort of lined up all of the different sites that they're at for next year already? I mean, do we have, are we gonna stay where we are, does it look like?
Yes, I don't think we'll be changing. We haven't issued the contracts yet. We haven't gotten to that point, but I think we'll be consistent with what we've done so far.
We had one preschool that didn't do 4K, is that right, or no?
One daycare, you mean?
One
Yeah.
preschool that, well, the whole preschool kind of went out of business. It's not
Oh,
that
it did, okay.
They didn't choose 4K, they just went out of business.
Okay.
We will have an open house night this year where all the sites will be open for 2 hours and parents can tour, just look at the different sites, and the sites will advertise their advantages, because they all do have their different personalities. Parents will know when they come to registration days which site they have for their first, second, and third choice. And we try to accommodate pretty much every single request as possible, based on numbers.
I think it's interesting taking a historical perspective of this, because I've been around long enough to remember that full-day kindergarten was a battle, getting that program into the school district. And 4K was, just something we weren't ready to put out there yet until, I give Rhonda and Maureen credit, they came to me and said, hey, we want to start a 4K program. And I said, okay, it's up to you.
I think
And they
it
did.
was time in the community too, just that was the.
And financially, don't we reap the benefits next year from that, from the 4K?
We'll get state aid on this year's count next year, yes. But it's not a moneymaker, if that's
But
what
it-
you need. But it does contribute to the state aid that we get, yes.
And if
Is
you
that
believe-
fair to say? Carl, is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is the potential for pupils, 1 year, I think a 1 year dollar amount, but that's not solidified.
I was just going to say that next year, we'll have 100% of all school districts offering a 4K program
In Wisconsin.
in Wisconsin.
You mentioned some of the open enrollment from other districts and that they may, or it was almost implied won't be enrolling here next year, but I would think that there might be some situations in which, due to where the parent works or whatever, is making it very convenient for them to enroll here now. I would imagine that may, especially with a very favorable experience through this, they may open enroll to the school district next year.
And that is a discussion that I actually just had with a parent the other night who is in the Shiocton School District. She works in this area. And she also expressed that if she were to go 4K in Waupaca, that she'd probably go at least through 3rd grade with her children. Again, life changes things, so who knows what will happen. But, I mean, if they're expressing interest in staying with our district for a few extra years, that's a great thing. So.
Well, and just so you guys know, you might all be friends now, but my second oldest grandchild they're applying for 4K in Eau Claire. And they're shopping, and it's competitive, and there's ratings, and it's like college, it's amazing. So I don't know if down the road you'll have surveys or things, but you guys might look at each other as the competition at some point. But
But I think that I feel that each site has their own unique personality that can offer special things. So parents and families are looking for the right fit for them. And I do believe that we have enough diversity among the sites to meet the needs of all of our families.
well, all your enthusiasm is wonderful. You guys obviously love what you do. And you must be good at it. I guess we'll find out.
There were some real hurdles we had to get over in order to get this started, with parents wanting morning or afternoon, or this site or that site, combinations of things. There were times I looked at it and said, this isn't gonna work. But in the end, it seems to have worked out just fine. I'm amazed.
We told you.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you all.
It's good coordination.
Thank you.
And thank you all for. Thank you.
We are now at the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Sandy and Connie have got
Roll call.
Connie Ballmer?
Yes.
Kirsty Greenfield?
Yes.
Stephen Johnson? Yes. Sandy Robinson? Patrick Fair?
Aye.
Betty Mannion?
Yes.
And Steve Campbell?
Yes. Is there a motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Yes.